When this gigantic $3,000 lens first came out, I think we all had the same reaction. Wow, that's a cool lens. Wonder if anybody's gonna buy it. Of course, everyone has different budgets and needs, and the idea of a full-frame f2 zoom does sound amazing. And considering the RF 24-70 f2.8 is already $2,300, maybe the price isn't so outrageous. But does that mean you should buy it? Today, we're gonna take a look at this lens and see if it's any good and who this lens is for, so let's get started. The hardware and build quality seem pretty similar to any other RF mount L lenses, which is good, but it doesn't necessarily feel better than any of them either. Except of course for the fact that this feels like a bowling ball. I like the matte coating on the RF mount lenses, but to some people, it may feel a bit plasticky. The zoom and focus rings feel smooth and evenly dampened throughout the range, and the control ring, I don't know if it's just because the ring is much bigger than usual, but it does feel a bit heavier than any of my other RF mount lenses. Nothing negative, it just feels a bit different. On one side there's the AF on and off switch, and on the other side there's the lock switch for the zoom ring, which I'm not sure was really necessary for this lens because the barrel barely moves unless you turn the zoom ring. I don't know if any other manufacturers do this, but I wish these locks could lock the zoom at any focal length, not just when the barrel is completely retracted, in case you want to shoot at a consistent range from the subject without changing the focal length. So far, I haven't seen any bad RF mount L lenses from Canon in terms of image quality, and this being the most hyped and the most expensive, the expectations were quite high. And my first impression of it is that it doesn't disappoint. This is one of the sharpest lenses that I've tested so far, from corner to corner, even wide open at f2, and the lens gets even sharper at f4 and 5.6, but not by much, and then after f11, the sharpness starts to decrease. So no matter what you're shooting, I don't think you need to really adjust your aperture just to get the most optimal sharpness. There is a bit of vignetting at f2, but nothing that can't be easily fixed, and it gets better at f2.8, and by f4, it almost completely goes away. The lens also does an excellent job managing the glare. I mean, it's still there if you try to look for it by intentionally shooting directly into the sun, but if you just shoot like a normal person, it's not gonna get in your way too much. Apart from the optics, I didn't think the f2 zoom would really wow me with things like bokeh, but I was really impressed by the images this lens could produce. Even at f2, you could get pretty reasonable amount of background blur, especially at close range, and more importantly, it just looks great. Here's a side-by-side comparison with f2.8, and as you can see, there's a big difference even between f2 and 2.8. And again, it's time to talk about some balls, and it seems like there are some onion rings happening inside some of the bouquet balls, and some of the balls are not as round as I like them to be, but for an f2 lens, I think this is pretty good. The lens's minimum focusing distance is 0.39 meters or 1.28 feet, and the sharpness is maintained at that range as well. The autofocus is fast and accurate, and in fact, it's a lot faster than the lenses like 50 or 85mm 1.2s. Not that they are direct competitors, but if you're a fashion photographer who may not always want to be shooting at 1.2 or 1.4, this lens's fast autofocus might be a big advantage over those lenses. It's not like the quietest lens while focusing, but not the most intrusive either. Here's what it sounds like. One thing that might push people to buy the smaller and cheaper 24-70 f2.8 is the range. It's very likely for event or wedding photographers to pair this up with a 70-200, so losing the 4mm focal length at the wider range might be a deal breaker to some. If you haven't seen this lens in person, you might also be wondering exactly how big and heavy this thing is. Just to give you an idea, here it is next to the 15-35, which is about the same size as the 24-70, and also the 24-105 f4. The 24-105 is 700 grams, and the 15-35 is 840 grams, and the 24-70 about 900 grams. The 28-70 f2 1,430 grams or 3.15 pounds. And for the record, that's about the same weight as the 1DX Mark III or the 70-200, not the RF version, the old EF version. And it uses a whopping 95mm filter thread. The 15-35 and the 24-70 use 82mm, and the 24-105 and the 70-200 use 77mm. So there are two ways to look at this. First, if you're one of those people who started shooting mirrorless because you wanted smaller and lighter cameras, you'll pretty much hate it. But second, if you're used to shooting events with bigger DSLRs with a 70-200 on the one shoulder and 24-70 on another, like I said, this weighs the same as the old EF 70-200, so it's not a huge deal. Also, if you get the new RF 70-200, it's about 30% lighter than this lens at 1070 grams, so it kind of evens it out, I guess. And like I said, if you're a portrait shooter, this is pretty heavy, but it's really not that much bigger in size than lenses like the RF 50 or 85 1.2s. So if you don't shoot much at 1.2 anyway, then this lens might actually be a better deal for you because those lenses already cost well over $2,000 each. So, is this lens worth $3,000 and should you buy it? Well, I think this will provide the best value to fashion and portrait shooters because this can potentially replace several primes in your bag. For event shooters and pretty much everyone else, I think it's a choice between this and the 24-70. And is it worth paying $700 more to go from f2.8 to f2 while losing the range at the wider end? Obviously, there's no right answer for that and you're gonna have to decide that for yourself. But if you can afford it and if you think it can provide good value for your business, it is a fantastic lens and there's nothing else like it on the market. So for that reason, I highly recommend this lens.